I read to escape from reality. So I decided to read this next book, which is about an unstable American president that drops nuclear bombs because of a war with North Korea and Russia invading most of Eastern Europe.
This is the introduction song. It's not very good, but it's not too long.
This book is called Bombs Away, and I mean, you can really sum up the premise of it in just a couple of words which are on the front cover. It says, "The Cold War has just gone hot," and that's basically it. You know, it's alternate history, so in real life, during the Korean War in the early 50s, Douglas MacArthur, general in charge of the American forces there, suggested to President Truman that they should drop nuclear bombs on China in order to help them win the war. And Truman said no, which is a really good policy generally, to not drop nuclear bombs. But in this book, it just says, Truman says yes, and then what happens from there? And it's bad. It's really bad. Like, it doesn't stop the war with China and North Korea at all. It just kills a bunch of Chinese people, and then it forces the Soviet Union, who by this point is also a nuclear power, to bomb a bunch of cities in Germany and France and England, and then they invade into West Germany, and then Americans and Soviet soldiers are fighting each other, and they're bombing the shit out of each other, and it's just generally a shit show. A really, really horrifying shit show. I think that's the one word that really sums up this whole thing best, is horrifying. Like, because we have all the regular warfare stuff where soldiers get, like, just blown up and shot and set on fire, and that's horrible. But you also have, by the end of this book, over a dozen cities are just gone, like, blown up in a nuclear fire. And this does not shy away from the fact that thousands of people are being wiped out in the blink of an eye, and radiation is starting to cover the whole fucking world. And they won't see the effects of that by the end of this book, because this takes place over the course of a couple of months, maybe a year. I don't know, the passage of time is a little weird. But, yeah, they're even the people that survive the initial radiation poisoning and things like that, there's gonna be a shitload of cancer cases and stuff, which this doesn't even really touch on, but I knew that going in, so I'm like, Christ, that's bad. And then, again, just whole civilizations are starting to crumble by the end of this, because there's just so much destruction and so much death, and just, it's horrifying, it really is, and this book does not shy away from that, so, it's officially alternate history, but I think you could add horror into the genres as well. It's not good. It's just every time a bomb goes off, whew, man. Sorry, I'm having trouble staying focused even just because it shakes me up. It really does. And besides that, other aspects of the book are also really good. You know, the plausibility of the history is moderate, you know. I'm not going to say that, yes, this is exactly what would have happened, because, you know, no one really knows, and honestly, I don't know for sure that it would happen exactly like this. Like, would they use as many atomic bombs as they did? Probably not, because, you know, they both sides knew that these are not toys to be played with. They're very bad. But all the actual regular warfare stuff, that seems plausible. You know, West Germany was occupied by American soldiers at the time, and it didn't really have its own standing army, so they would have been severely, severely outnumbered by the Soviets and the Hungarians or Romanians and all them just pouring in. So it makes sense that they would start getting pushed back like that. And the only other war that is really mentioned is in Korea, and that one actually slows down and takes sort of a backseat, both in the book's world and in the story itself. Like, they focus on it a lot less as time goes on, but it basically just seems to be more or less stalemated, which I don't think is very realistic. I think that the Chinese and the North Koreans would eventually just push the Americans off the peninsula if they weren't focusing their efforts on it. But I'm not really an expert on that, so if you feel differently, let me know, and let me know why you think that, because I don't know, it's not important, but, you know, the history in this is plausible, which is good, and, again, it makes everything even more horrifying. I keep going back to that word, but that's really it. It's horrifying because it feels like, yes, this could have really happened, and let's be grateful that it didn't. But the actual story of this isn't that important. We're really just reading it to see how the world changes. You know, that's how Harry Turtledove seems to write a lot of his books. It's not the story of a group of people. It's the story of the whole world, or sometimes a whole region of the world, and just how this one change would change all of human history. And that to me is fascinating. That's why I like alternate history so much. But if it's not fascinating to you, then I guess you probably wouldn't enjoy this as much as I did. The main area where this book really falls flat is just the character cast. And I mean, I don't really know how they could have done it much differently, but the way they did do it is it's not good. I mean, there's just too many is the biggest thing. There are like 20 or 25 point of view characters in this, and that, like, on one hand that's great because we get a view of the conflict from a bunch of different sides, you know, from Harry Truman, who's in charge of the United States, basically, but then there's also a bunch of, like, regular civilians who do stuff, and soldiers on both sides who are dealing with things, and pilots, and just, it's very nice to have such a big group, what's the word? It's not nice to have such a big group that views everything from multiple angles, but at the same time, you just can't keep track of them all. And most of them don't have particularly interesting personalities or anything, so it's a bit of a trade-off, but I don't know how they could do it differently. I mean, there's one or two characters that have interesting personalities, because mostly soldiers who, you know, they're stuck fighting in this war that none of them really want. No one on either side wants this, but they just feel pulled into it for one reason or another, and they're stuck in this really, really bad situation where it's kill or be killed, and they have to see a bunch of their friends die and shit. And so, you know, seeing that is nice, but, you know, they don't stand out all that much from one another. In fact, while I was reading, I repeatedly was not sure who this character was when their section would start up until they mentioned something about where they were, or they cursed the other side or something. Like, so again, I just don't know how they could have done it differently, but it's a bit flat, and it just doesn't work that well. So that's about all there is to say. You know, if you just are interested in seeing how World War III could have happened in the 1950s, then go ahead and give this a shot. You know, if you're interested in war stories, then go ahead and give this a shot as well, because, again, Harry Turtledove does write really good war stories. I'll probably review the Great War trilogy one day, just not right now, because, I mean, I need to reread all of them, and I don't feel like doing that at the moment. But, you know, if you're into either of those things, then seriously check this out, because it is very, very good. And if you're into horror at all, then check this out too, because this is like an existential civilization ending sort of horror, and not just one monster in the woods or anything. And that makes it very strong as well.